On the evening of the 8th of May 1987, a mechanical digger turns off the Loughgall Road and points its bucket toward the perimeter fence of a small Royal Ulster Constabulary station in County Armagh. The bomb in the bucket, 300 to 400 pounds of explosive packed into an oil drum, has already been primed. 2 40-second fuses are lit. The IRA's East Tyrone Brigade, 8 men in boiler suits and balaclavas, believes this is the night they destroy another isolated outpost of British authority in rural Ulster. They have done it before. The plan is sound, the target is barely defended. What they don't know is that the station was quietly emptied of its normal 3-person staff days ago. They don't know that 24 soldiers from the Special Air Service have been in position around that building for hours. They don't know that covert observation posts have been tracking this digger since it was moved from a farm at Lislasly Road 2 miles to the west, and that those watchers radioed ahead the moment it rolled toward Loughgall. The war the East Tyrone Brigade believed they were fighting was already over. They just hadn't been told. To understand what happened at Loughgall, you have to understand what the East Tyrone Brigade actually was. Because if you see it only as 8 men who drove into a trap, you miss the point entirely. The men who died that evening weren't an amateur cell making amateur mistakes. They were the most operationally sophisticated rural active service unit the provisional IRA ever put in the field. Patrick Joseph Kelly, 30 years old, sat in the front passenger seat of the blue Toyota Hi-S van that pulled up behind the digger. He had been officer commanding the East Tyrone Brigade since approximately 1983 to 1985, taking over a unit that was already dangerous and turning it into something qualitatively different. His leadership style was described as disciplined and composed. Patrick Kelly wasn't acting on impulse. He was the product of a deep Republican tradition in the mid-Ulster border counties. And by 1987, he was running a brigade that had spent 2 years making life close to intolerable for the RUC across a wide swathe of County Tyrone and County Armagh. Sitting in the rear of that van was Jim Liner, 31. The RUC called him the Executioner. He had joined the IRA in the early 1970s, been badly wounded in a premature bomb explosion in December 1973, served roughly 5 years in Long Kesh, and come out with a strategy. In prison, he had studied Mao Zedong, Vo Nguyen Giap, and the flying columns of the 1919 to 1921 IRA. What he developed, alongside Padraig McKierney, 32, who also sat in that van, was a Maoist doctrine of liberated zones adapted to rural Ulster. The idea was straightforward and genuinely dangerous. Destroy every isolated RUC station you can reach. Deter the contractors who try to rebuild them, and make the British security presence in border districts non-viable. Not random violence, a systematic campaign to render territory ungovernable. British security assessments described the brigade as highly regarded for its proficiency, capacity and confidence. That was understatement. In the 6 months before the 8th of May 1987, the East Tyrone Brigade had carried out 22 attacks and killed 7 members of the security forces. Reportedly, British military assessments linked the guns recovered from the dead IRA members to dozens of security force killings. Among those weapons was a Ruger revolver taken from Reserve Constable William Clements, shot dead when the brigade destroyed the Ballygawley RUC barracks in December 1985, killing 2 officers. That Ballygawley attack was part of a pattern with a clear internal logic. In December 1985, a mortar assault on the Tyrone RUC base injured 4 officers. The attacks accumulated. By August 1986, they had refined their most audacious tactic, the digger bomb. On August 11, 1986, the East Tyrone Brigade stole a JCB loader, packed roughly 200 pounds of explosive into its front bucket, and drove it through the perimeter fence of the RUC station at the Birches near Portadown in County Armagh. Approximately 35 IRA members participated: lookouts, an armed assault team, bomb makers. A diversionary bomb detonated simultaneously at Pomeroy to split security force attention, escape route support. The station was completely destroyed. No police were killed. Multiple analyses explicitly describe the Birches operation as the dry run for Loughgall. The identical basic tactic, a stolen digger, a large bomb in the bucket, automatic weapons covering fire against a lightly defended rural station, would be replicated 9 months later. The brigade had tested the method, found it worked, and intended to use it again. In January 1987, the brigade shot a senior UDR officer outside his home in Dungannon. When the digger pulled up outside Loughgall on the 8th of May 1987, it was executing a proven operational template built on a track record of confirmed lethality. These weren't men who stumbled. They were men who had rehearsed. So how did the SAS know? The confirmed answer is that British security forces had actionable intelligence about a planned attack on an RUC station weeks before the 8th of May 1987. Documents disclosed in later legal proceedings confirmed that the IRA members involved had been under military surveillance for weeks prior to the ambush. British forces identified Loughgall as the specific target approximately 10 days in advance. Somewhere on or around the 30th of April 1987, a special branch handler received detailed information from a source about the planned operation. The station was quietly evacuated, its normal staff replaced with 2 Headquarters Mobile Support Unit tactical officers. A covert observation post was established to monitor the hijacked digger from the moment it was moved. The operation was codenamed Operation Judy. The intelligence architecture behind it involved multiple overlapping agencies. The Force Research Unit, a covert British Army intelligence unit running agents inside paramilitary organisations since approximately 1980, was one component. RUC Special Branch, formerly designated as Controller of Agents on Subversive Organisations under the 1981 Walker Report, was another. MI5 and the Army's 14th Intelligence Company, whose undercover soldiers drove surveillance routes around the back roads into Loughgall that evening, contributed others. All of this fed into the tasking and coordinating Group South, based at Gough Barracks in Armagh, which served as the operational hub that fused intelligence from all these agencies into actionable targeting. Exactly how the specific Loughgall intelligence was obtained is where the record becomes more complicated. One persistent account alleges a double agent inside the IRA unit provided the warning and was killed in the ambush. One of the 8 men killed, Tony Gormley, 24, was known to security forces as a well-paid special branch informant. But historian Richard English has concluded that the specific Loughgall warning didn't come from within the 8-man assault unit itself. Other assessments point to signals intelligence, telephone intercepts, and technical surveillance that were extensively deployed in the border counties by this stage. The most cautious, evidence-based position cited across multiple analyses is a convergence. Prolonged ground surveillance, signals intercepts, and a wider web of human intelligence penetration assembled by multiple agencies and coordinated through the TCG. Whatever the source, intelligence was passed to the SAS without revealing its origin. Standard practice under the Walker Report meant it moved in need-to-know form, laundered through joint structures, so that if the operation ever reached a court, the sourcing remained concealed. Mark Urban's 1992 book Big Boys Rules identified Loughgall as the clearest example of what he called the clean kill strategy. Intelligence used to set up an ambush of an active service unit during a live operation, structured so no arrests occurred and little evidence needed to be disclosed. Courts wouldn't need to know how it was known. The source would survive. But there is a layer beneath the intelligence architecture that makes Loughgall more than a successful ambush. And it's the detail that the IRA itself spent years trying to find and never could. The IRA's internal security unit, called the Nutting Squad by everyone outside the organisation, was the IRA's own counterintelligence apparatus. Its function was to identify, interrogate and execute suspected informers. Time magazine described its methods plainly: shooting victims in the head. The unit functioned, in the words of one analysis, as an electrical junction box through which every wire must flow. Every internal inquiry about penetration, every investigation of a failed operation, every suspected informer passed through it. The head of the Nutting Squad throughout this period was a Belfast man named Freddie Scappaticci. He was also, according to a 9-year PSNI investigation called Operation Canova, and confirmed through BBC reporting, a long-term Force Research Unit agent codenamed Steak Knife. Scappaticci was recruited as a British agent in the late 1970s and operated for well over a decade. He produced 3,517 intelligence reports, including 377 in a single 18-month period. Operation Canova's interim report, published in March 2024, found he was involved in kidnap, torture and murder while on the state payroll, connected to 14 to 18 confirmed killings. The December 2025 final report reached a conclusion that erased the long-standing British government claim that running Steak Knife had saved hundreds of lives. Canova found that more lives were probably lost than saved by his continued operation as an agent. MI5, the report noted, was more closely involved in handling him than had previously been acknowledged. His position inside the IRA was structurally unique and structurally devastating. As head of the Nutting Squad, he could learn which IRA members were under suspicion. He could direct internal investigations toward innocent people and away from genuine agents. He could manipulate the evidence available to the organisation about its own penetration. And he reported everything back to his British handlers, including, crucially, what the IRA thought it knew about who was betraying them. BBC reporting has confirmed that after Loughgall, Scappaticci headed the IRA's internal investigation into how the ambush had been compromised. The investigation, run by the man who was himself a British agent, found nothing. It couldn't have found anything that threatened the people who mattered. The IRA assigned its spy hunter to find the spy, and the spy hunter was the spy. No published material from Operation Canova has established that Scappaticci personally provided the specific intelligence that enabled the Loughgall ambush. That direct causal link remains unconfirmed. But the post-ambush investigation he led demonstrates something nearly as damning. Even after the IRA's worst single intelligence failure during the entire Troubles, the apparatus they turned to for answers was itself compromised. The internal search for the betrayal was conducted by one of the people responsible for it. The IRA tried another approach. In March 1989, 2 years after the ambush, RUC Chief Superintendent Harry Breen was shot dead in an IRA ambush near the Irish border. The 2013 Smithick Tribunal, an Irish inquiry into Garda Síochána collusion, concluded that Breen had been targeted specifically so the IRA could abduct and interrogate him about how British security services had advance warning of Loughgall. Breen had given the media briefing at the scene the morning after the ambush. He had displayed the recovered weapons on television. The IRA believed someone with access to that level of advance intelligence was still traceable, and they were trying to find the thread. 2 years later, still looking, they killed a man in hopes of pulling it. They never found the answer. Now back to the 8th of May, 1987. Shortly after 1900, 4 IRA vehicles arrive in Loughgall from the northeast. Declan Arthurs, 21, drives the digger. Tony Gormley and Gerard O'Callaghan ride with him, weapons in one hand, a lighter in the other. Eugene Kelly, 25, drives the Toyota Hiace. Patrick Kelly is in the front passenger seat. In the rear, Jim Liner, Padraig McKerney and Seamus Donnelly, 19 years old. The digger makes one slow pass of the station. The van follows. Members of the unit notice the station looks quiet. No visible activity at the hour when the 3 local officers would normally be on duty. Some debate calling it off. They decide to proceed. At approximately 19:15, Arthurs drives the digger toward the perimeter fence. In the front bucket, 300 to 400 pounds of explosive inside an oil drum, partially concealed by rubble, wired to 2 40-second fuses. The digger smashes through the light security fence. The fuses are lit. The van stops. Patrick Kelly jumps from the passenger seat and opens fire on the building with automatic weapons. According to journalist Peter Taylor's reconstruction, co-corroborated by ECHR material, Kelly fired either to resolve the internal debate about proceeding or because that was simply how previous attacks had begun. Others follow him out. At that moment, 2 things happen almost simultaneously. The 6 SAS soldiers in plain clothes inside the station begin returning fire. The 18 SAS soldiers, concealed in 5 separate positions in the wooded areas and fields surrounding the station, open up from outside. An RUC Special Branch officer described how the SAS had strung detonating cord along a line of fir trees opposite the station beyond a playing field. That cord was triggered as the ambush was initiated. A flash and crack from the tree line to pull attention, while fire came from multiple directions at once. The weapons included M16 and Heckler & Koch G3 rifles, and at least 2 L7A2 general-purpose machine guns positioned at the outer ambush posts. Then the bomb detonated. The blast destroyed the digger and badly damaged the station building. The firefight lasted approximately 3 to 4 minutes. 600 spent cartridge cases were recovered from British weapons, 78 from IRA weapons. The van's bodywork had approximately 125 bullet holes in it. The ratio is the whole story in 2 numbers. The Historical Inquiries team reviewed the ambush in 2011 and concluded that the IRA opened fire first on the station. That is a confirmed finding, not a contested one. The IRA did fire. They fired 78 rounds. They detonated a bomb large enough to badly damage a building. 3 RUC constables were injured, 1 with severe head injuries, 1 with a broken nose. 3 SAS soldiers were wounded, one with a facial injury from glass broken by gunfire. The ambush wasn't a suppression of passive men walking toward a target. It was the answer to an attack already in motion. All 8 IRA members were killed by gunfire. None died in the explosion. All had multiple wounds, including wounds to the head. 3 were shot at close range while already dead or wounded on the ground. 2 were found to have been unarmed when they were killed. These are documented facts from inquest proceedings and investigative findings. The use of lethal force that day was operationally coherent given the circumstances, and it was also not a clean or uncomplicated event. 24 SAS soldiers against 8 attackers. 600 rounds answered with 78. There was one more death that evening, and it isn't optional to name him. Anthony Hughes, 36 years old, was a Catholic civilian. He was married with 3 children. That evening, he and his brother Oliver were driving home in a white Citroën GS after repairing a lorry. They had no connection to the IRA operation. Their route took them past the station. Roughly 130 yards from the station, SAS soldiers opened fire on the car from behind. Anthony Hughes was killed. Oliver was shot 14 times and survived. Approximately 34 bullet holes were found in the Citroën. The villagers of Loughgall had not been informed that an ambush was being prepared around them. No attempt had been made to seal off the zone. Doing so would have compromised the operation by alerting the IRA. A mother and her child took shelter in a church hall after a stray bullet struck their car 250 yards from the station. Anthony Hughes was the cost of that decision. No SAS soldier was prosecuted for his death. The Director of Public Prosecutions reviewed the evidence in September 1987 and found no grounds for prosecution. The European Court of Human Rights ruled in 2001 that the British government had violated the human rights of those killed at Loughgall, not by declaring the killings unlawful, but by failing to conduct an adequate, independent investigation into the deaths. Anthony Hughes's widow settled a civil claim out of court in April 1991. The 8 IRA funerals drew thousands of mourners, the largest Republican funerals in Northern Ireland since those of the 1981 hunger strikers. At the graveside, Gerry Adams reportedly delivered an oration invoking Lynagh and McKerney by name, declaring the British state could never defeat men like them. In Republican circles, the 8 became the Loughgall Martyrs, an official designation applied immediately and maintained ever since. That speed of memorialisation tells you something about the scale of the loss felt inside the movement. Its Brigade OC, its leading strategist, its second-ranking strategist, and 5 active operators, what sources describe as the A-team, were gone in 3 to 4 minutes. But grief and commemoration aren't the same as organisational reality. The IRA also had to reckon with what the intelligence failure actually meant. The internal hunt for the source of the betrayal was immediately launched. It was headed by Freddie Scappaticci. It found nothing. What followed was something harder to quantify, but well established in pattern. A spreading, corrosive paranoia about informants that began to affect operational behaviour. Tommy McKerney, a senior Republican and former East Tyrone IRA member, later reflected that by the mid-1980s, the British government's intelligence agencies had heavily penetrated the IRA. He was describing a process already underway before Loughgall, but the ambush made it viscerally concrete. If 8 of the most experienced and security-conscious men in the organisation could be walked into a kill zone, men who had taken precautions, men who had spotted something was amiss and almost aborted, men who had driven past the station twice looking for signs of danger, then the penetration wasn't theoretical. It was operational. The nutting squad's role became simultaneously more desperate and more distorted. With steak knife at its head, the apparatus tasked with rooting out informers was partly directed by one. Operation Canova's findings spread across years of investigation, and a final report in December 2025 established that Scappaticci was connected to kidnap, torture and murder while on the state payroll. Some of the people the nutting squad killed were innocent. Some were genuine informants whose deaths the state allowed to happen because intervening would have burned the most valuable agent British intelligence had ever placed inside the IRA. It's essential to state clearly what Loughgall didn't accomplish. The East Tyrone Brigade was crippled but not destroyed. On August 20th, 1988, 15 months after the ambush, an IRA roadside bomb near Ballygawley, County Tyrone, killed 8 soldiers from the 1st Battalion Light Infantry and injured 28 more. The attack used Semtex. It was attributed to East Tyrone Brigade remnants. The brigade continued operations and continued to suffer heavy losses to SAS ambushes through the late 1980s and into the 1990s. Over the entire Troubles, the East Tyrone Brigade lost 53 volunteers killed, with 28 of those deaths falling between 1987 and 1992, a sustained period of attrition, not immediate collapse. What Loughgall did destroy was the specific leadership core, Kelly, Liner, McKerney, and the strategic vision they embodied. These were the men arguing inside the IRA that a military victory in the border counties was still achievable if pursued with sufficient discipline. They had been pushing for the creation of a permanent mobile guerrilla unit based across the border in the Republic. A flying column that could escalate the campaign into something resembling a real insurgency. GHQ rejected it. The men making the argument were dead before it could be pressed further. Their replacements inherited neither their experience nor their authority. The intelligence failure also demonstrated something that couldn't be walked back. The armed struggle could be fully anticipated at the highest level of operational planning by British intelligence. The IRA could recruit, plan, acquire weapons, rehearse a proven tactic, select a target, and still be annihilated before they reached it. Not because the security forces had better guns, but because someone had already told the other side. That realization spread through Republican circles and didn't go away. The shadow war had a texture the daytime war couldn't see. The nutting squad investigating Loughgall was itself penetrated. The intelligence flowing back from Steakknife's 3,517 reports covered IRA internal security operations across the organisation. Every time the IRA tried to find the leak, a key part of the search was managed by the leak. Return to the digger. Declan Arthurs started the engine in the knowledge that his unit had done this before, at the Birches 9 months earlier, and it had worked. He had no reason to believe it wouldn't work again. Patrick Kelly had led a brigade that had killed dozens and destroyed dozens of security force facilities over several years. Jim Liner had studied guerrilla warfare in prison and spent a decade building a campaign in the border counties. Padraig McKerney had broken out of the Maze prison in the largest prison escape in British history, been returned to active service and never stopped fighting. Seamus Donnelly was 19 years old. None of them knew the station had been emptied. None of them knew 24 SAS soldiers were waiting in the trees. None of them knew that British intelligence had watched this operation assemble from weeks out, had named the target 10 days before it happened, and had prepared a reception from which there was no exit. The weapons they carried had been used in killings. The tactic they used had been proven. The unit they represented was, by any honest military assessment, among the most dangerous rural active service units the Troubles produced. The war was over before the diggers' engine started. The IRA's shadow had been wearing a wire. Subscribe for more stories like this.